On our exclusive visit to Volodymyr Zelensky's wartime bunker, Ukraine's president tells the BBC countries still buying Russian oil have blood on their hands. Russia says the flagship of its Black Sea fleet, the Moskva, has sunk after an explosion. Ukraine claims it hit the Moskva with missiles.
Explosions in the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, as Russia admits its most powerful warship has sunk. Explosions have been heard overnight in Ukrainian cities, including the capital, Kyiv, just hours after Russia's flagship warship was sunk in the Black Sea.
Now, Ukraine claims it struck the ship with missiles, but Russia continues to insist the sinking was caused by an accidental explosion coupled with rough seas. With all the latest details, here's Tim Ullman.
The scourge of the Black Sea, now buried at the bottom of it. But how the Moskva got there is still disputed. Ukraine says it hit the ship with cruise missiles launched from the coast. Russia would only admit there had been an explosion on board and it then sank in bad weather. If the Ukrainians were responsible, it would be the biggest warship to be sunk by enemy action since the Second World War.
This is a tremendous victory for Ukraine, even if they didn't directly contribute to the sinking. And it's an enormous defeat for Russia because it indicates that the Russian armed forces simply aren't up to snuff in terms of modern military capabilities.
Perhaps not, but it does beg the question, how will Russia react? These were air raid sirens heard overnight in the western city of Lviv for the first time in several days. And there were reports of powerful explosions in the capital, Kyiv. In his latest video message, President Zelensky made reference to the fate of the Moskva. He praised the Ukrainian people, those who stopped the advance of endless columns of Russian equipment, those who proved that Russian planes were defenseless, and those who proved that Russian ships can only go to the bottom of the sea. But in the east of the country, invading troops continue their operations. The Ukrainian government fears their main goal now is to destroy the Donbass region. Russia may have sustained a heavy defeat, but it is still very much in this war. Tim Ullman, BBC News.
Well, let's go now to our correspondent, Dan Johnson, who's in the western city of Lviv. Morning to you, Dan. So just tell us what more you know about these explosions in Kyiv.
Yes, we know that there were a handful of explosions reported to the southwest of the capital city last night. It's not been confirmed exactly where they came from, what was hit, what level of damage has been sustained, if any. But that wasn't the only place that was going through air raid alerts last night, not the only place that may have been hit. There were explosions also reported in Kherson, and there have been air raid warnings across different cities across Ukraine. There were two different air raid alerts here in Lviv in the west after a couple of days that have been relatively calm and quiet here. So it shows you how the conflict is continuing, how it's still affecting people who are even a long, long way from the fighting, and how people are perhaps on edge. And there had been a renewed fear that Russia having to admit that that flagship of its Black Sea fleet has now sunk to the bottom of the Black Sea might prompt further attacks, perhaps in retaliation. Whether or not the Russians will admit that it was a Ukrainian missile that sunk that ship, the fact that that ship is out of action, has gone to the bottom of the sea, means that Russia's military firepower is at least slightly reduced for the immediate future until they can replace that ship with another. It means that Ukrainian aircraft are more safe flying along the coast, and it is a major propaganda victory for the Ukrainians, especially given the symbolism that had surrounded that ship since the very start of the conflict. There have also been renewed reports of shelling in Kharkiv in the northeast of Ukraine overnight. The Ukrainian local official there says at least 24 children are among the 500 civilians who have died in that city since the start of the invasion.
The Telegraph reports on a British man who has reportedly been captured by Russian forces while fighting in the Ukrainian military. Aidan Aslin's family have appealed for him to be treated humanely.